I will say that, I'm very, very blessed and grateful that I have been able to quickly address and identify what needed to be corrected. But that also comes from the wise seek counsel, right? I always am hungry to learn more and ask questions. And now I have the pleasure of knowing it all. So
you absolutely know everything. I don't know why we all just don't come to Nicole.
I'm just kidding.
You have a problem, go to Nicole. She has the answers. And even if she doesn't have the answers, she has the answers. So that's how it works.
If I don't have the answers, the question was wrong.
That is the snippet for this episode. If I don't have the answers, the question was wrong. I love it. All right, everybody, welcome back to Our Business Shenanigans. I can't even say it right. It's been a stressful morning already. This is the podcast where strategy meets sarcasm and entrepreneurship gets real. Hosted by myself, Jen Rogers, and Nicole Cobb, this podcast dives into raw, unfiltered side of running a business. The wins, the failures, the hilarious chaos in between. And today's episode, we are talking specifically about subcontractors versus employees and how screwing it up can cost you everything.
Now, full disclaimer, this episode is not sexy, but it's definitely necessary. Why we're fired up about this topic is because we see too many small businesses doing it all wrong. Real talk, if you're paying people as 1099s but treating them like employees, you're gambling with your entire business.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people go, well, what's the difference? An employee is an employee, right? Well, let's break down what makes a subcontractor versus an employee, because they are two totally different things, and we'll talk about it in plain English. So for somebody to be an employee, that's what we call a W-2 employee. That means that you control their schedule, you provide their tools, uniforms, training. You are legally required to pay for their payroll taxes, insurance, and benefits, and they are covered by labor laws, minimum wage, overtime, etc.
And subcontractors, since they work independently, they set their own schedule, they bring their own tools. You cannot control outcomes, not how the work gets done, and they can work for other companies as well.
Right. So the bottom line is if you're telling them what time to be there, what to wear, how to do the job, and requiring loyalty, they're probably not a subcontractor.
And the IRS rules in the gray area we're about to go over. The IRS does not play when it comes to classification. They use 3 core tests, and that is behavioral control. Do you tell them how to do the work? Financial control. Do you control how they're paid or reimburse them for expenses? And relationship type. Are they exclusive to you, or do you prefer perks like an employee?
Right. So let's talk about those for a second. When we say behavioral control, that means if you are saying you have to clean this house a certain way, like if you are training them how to go in and clean a house for in our industry anyway, because we are house cleaners, but regardless of the industry, if you are telling them how they have to go in and do the work, probably an employee.
Yeah, you're not supposed to train. And especially if you're advertising on Facebook, I'm looking to hire, they're probably not a subcontractor.
And then we talk about the financial control. So that means when you have somebody who's a subcontractor, contrary to popular belief, I can't tell you what I'm going to pay you as a subcontractor. A subcontractor sets their own pricing. So they have to come to me and say, hey, for that house, I'm going to charge this amount of money. And then you, as the business owner, have your markup for whatever that is. And then you go in and you sell the job. They also, I learned this just recently because one of the meetings I was in, which I thought was super interesting, from an HR professional. So this isn't just me saying, I'm an expert or whatever, but also talk to your HR professionals just in case. That's my disclaimer. She was in the meeting and she was talking about it. And she was saying that if it is a subcontractor, they need to be invoicing you either at the end of every job or at the end of every week for the work that they've done. You can't just pay them at the end of the week for what you've said they've worked. They have to provide you with an invoice for their work.
Yes, they set their rates.
Yep.
And are they exclusive to you? Because according to the IRS, if you are their sole source of income, they need to be classified as your employee.
Sole source of cleaning income, by the way, not just like they can DoorDash and stuff like that on the side. If they are a independent cleaning subcontractor or whatever subcontractor, you can't be their only source of that trade's work. So they have to prove that they are doing other cleaning jobs or painting jobs or whatever outside of you. Which I thought was super interesting. I didn't realize that before.
Yeah, and they can't wear like your logo or a uniform. You can't supply the tools or the equipment. You can't discipline or evaluate them. You can't give them a handbook, right? Because they're not an employee. And you can't train them. If you're doing those are all warning signs that you are misclassifying.
I can't imagine sending somebody into, and I say that now because back in the beginning, we all did what we did, but I can't imagine now sending somebody that I don't even really know well just to go clean one of my clients' houses and trust that everything's going to go okay. Like, I don't know. What are you using? What are you using in the bathtub? What are you using on the marble countertops? Like, that to me is terrifying. But at the end of the day, even if they sign a 1099 form for you, if you treat them like an employee, the IRS will too. And at the end of the day, again, the IRS always wants their money.
I always compare it to like if you're trying to explain to someone the difference between an employee and a 1099, I like to explain it as DoorDash, right? DoorDash is a great example. They are 1099 subcontractors because they set their own schedule. They can hop on whenever they want. They wear what they want. They could have a friend in the car with them as they're delivering the food. You name it. You can't tell them what to do otherwise, right?
Right.
So at least they're complying and doing it, I guess, the right way to have a subcontractor.
Right.
But realistically, from a client perspective, if you are in the cleaning world, if you are employing subcontractors for cleaners, you're just like the middleman. You are just a matchmaker for here's a cleaner, here's a client, go clean for them. And after that, you have no control. You have no say if that person goes to clean for them on the side, you name it. Like that, you just match, you're just a matchmaker.
Yeah. And in our world, you hear a lot of people talking about non-solicitation agreements. But if they're a subcontractor, I don't even know how those would hold up in court because at the end of the day, you've given that individual, because a subcontractor is basically their own business owner, right? So if you are sending work to that subcontractor, at the end of the day, you've basically just said, here's the job. I can't then tell you, no, you can't go back and talk to that person. It's a different world as opposed to a W-2 employee. Like, no, we have brought that in as a client to the company. Anybody in the company can go and clean that. They're going to have job security and all of that. So at the end of the day, I don't even know how well non-solicitation agreements would hold up for subcontractors.
Yeah, I think that probably would go state by state because like
Yeah.
non-solicitation, I don't know that we can control if you had 1099 workers, I don't know that you can control that.
So many of us start this business because we started working for somebody as a subcontractor, right? So, like, I started this business because somebody else hired me as a subcontractor. And then in the beginning, I modeled my business after what I was taught. What we don't know can really hurt us in this instance. I thought the person that hired me when I originally started cleaning was doing everything by the book. I thought that, yeah, it's fine. Subcontractor, I'm doing vacation cleans or whatever. But at the end of the day, I still had to be there at a certain time. I did provide my own cleaning products, but they came in and inspected absolutely everything that I did, went behind me with a fine tooth comb. Like, there was still a lot of lines there being crossed as a subcontractor versus a W-2 employee. So even if you have modeled your business after whoever got you into the business, or you modeled your business after somebody else who started or whatever, do your research. Like, understand that just because somebody else has started their business off that way, or you worked for somebody that way, doesn't necessarily mean that it is right.
Yes, I agree. Same situation. I was hired as a 1099, started my own. I will say that she was more compliant. I think the only thing that she did differently was that she shouldn't have, now that I know better, was she provided the supplies, right? But she also, I never knew what I was getting paid. Like I didn't set a rate. I just got a random amount of money in cash every week. And I just remember working my butt off and I was lucky to make like 500 bucks. And I was like, yes, I made $500, right? But
Yeah.
not knowing that I was missing out on the protections of an employee.
Well, yeah, in the beginning, for when the last person or the person that I worked for was paying me under the table. And at the time it was like, "Oh, cool, I'm getting paid under the table." But then I realized like, "Wait, no, I'm not paying into anything." And at the end of the day, she was losing that money because she wasn't able to claim me as a tax write-off either. It's not just like as a business we're going, "Oh, you have to do this because of this and this." Like at the end of the day, it's in the best interest for both parties involved, the employee and the owner. Like there's so many other liabilities that come along with it.
One thing about when I worked as a 1099 that I didn't know was the taxes that come after that. Right? So nobody tells you that part. They don't tell
No.
you the unsexy part of it. So at the end of the year, when you file your taxes and you're like, oh my gosh, why do I owe so much? And it's because technically as a 1099, you are your own business by law, right? Which
Yeah.
means I should have
You're
my own
paying that self.
insurance. I should.
And that
Yep.
self-employment tax is huge.
Yes. And so it was like I got hit at the end of the year and had no idea what was happening because I just didn't know any better. But it wasn't fair as the employer. She cut so many corners on taxes and things. And then what's crazy is it was like when I switched, I think I did like one house for her or something. And the following year, what ended up happening is she's like texting me and she's like, "Hey, what's your address? I need to send you a 1099." And I was like, and now I knew better. I had started my business at this point. I knew better. And I said, "I don't think that I worked enough for you." I was like, "I made like $100." And I was like, "I
Yeah.
don't know that I qualify for a 1099." And she was like, "I have you down for," and it was like 650 or something. And I was like, "No, you didn't." But I wasn't sending her invoices, so
Right.
there's so much, and we'll dive more into that. If you're totally lost where we're at right now, or like the things that we're saying are confusing you, don't worry, we're going to break it down just a little bit more for you.
Right.
But businesses that misclassify employees essentially as independent contractors, they gain an unfair competitive advantage by reducing labor cost. And when you reduce labor costs, you can offer your services at a much steeper discounted price. This practice undermines fair competition and can harm businesses that comply with the labor laws.
One of my favorite quotes that I heard somewhere, and I think it was on a documentary for, I think it was Brandy Hellville, it was like fast fashion documentary or whatever. But they said that when there is an unbelievably cheap price, that means that somewhere along the line somebody is being exploited. So when they are able to charge those cheaper rates because they have that subcontractor is being exploited. They're not getting paid what they're worth. Now they're having to worry about all of these taxes at the end of the year. They're not being educated on all of the deductions that they could be taking because they are considered, self-employed. And so they're being exploited to go clean that house for $15 an hour, $20 an hour, and at the end of the day, they're probably only bringing home what, maybe $10 an hour, $9 an hour after you factor in all of the other stuff. So when you think about price and when you're looking at something and you say, "Man, I just really want to go for the cheapest price," you really have to think about all the people that are being exploited along the lines to get you that cheap price.
I'm going to draw something that my mentor taught me a long time ago.
I love your art
And
skills, so this should be fun.
they're horrible. Okay, so you see it's like a triangle and it says quality, price, and demand, meaning like scheduling demand, right?
Hmm.
You can have two, but you can't have, sorry. So you can have two of these, any two,
Right.
but you can't have the third one. So I can't sit here and call you and say, I need a cleaning this month, but I want the cheapest price and I want the best quality. You can only have two of those wherever you go. It is impossible to offer all three. As a
Right.
reputable business, your as a reputable business that employs actual W-2 employees, and if depending on how you operate, our goal is to have quality and demand. The price is what you're going to have to negotiate on, right? You're going to have to
Right.
budge on that one because we want to offer a high quality service, but we also want to offer it in a timely manner. So,
Right. Also, as a business owner who is hiring subcontractors, if you're hiring them incorrectly, you're really avoiding your taxes, and that's considered tax evasion. By misclassifying employees, companies can avoid paying their fair share of taxes, which reduces the amount of funding for public services. So, again, when we talk about like that ripple effect of all the things that you're doing, not only is your employee subcontractor getting hurt because they're getting taxed out the wazoo at the end of the year. I think it's like what, 28% or something like that for the self-employment tax. Now that money is not going back in for public services. That person is now not being able to do the things they want to do. So it is a ripple effect all across the board when you're not doing things the proper and legal way.
yes, and as a 1099, what they don't tell you, most 1099s don't last a full year. It's usually around tax time that they find a W-2 job, to be clear. But if you want to go buy a car or buy a house, anything that you have to prove your income on, you don't have a pay stub to fall on. And as
Right.
a 1099, if you want to buy a house, you're going off of 2+ years of taxes, and it has to show enough of a net pay to actually
Right.
qualify. So it's harder to qualify for these things that should be standard, right, across the board, that these people deserve. They make the money, but they don't, especially if you're under the table and you're not even 1099, you can't prove income anyway.
No. Well, and
There's
and like what I was told, well, oh, well, you can write off your cleaning supplies. You can write off your vacuum. You can, in the beginning, you can write off your cell phone. You can write off all this stuff. But then by the time you write all of that stuff off, it looks like a loss. So then again, you have no proof of income. So when you go to apply for a car loan or a house loan, your business looks like a loss. So it doesn't matter how much you're busting your butt out there. You still can't qualify to buy some of the bigger purchases in your life.
You also, so my accountant taught me this, you have to show a trend of a gain of how do I explain this? You have to show a trend that you're growing and that your gross pay is going up and your net pay is growing. If you claim a negative or it's too low a certain amount of years in a row, the IRS classifies your work as a hobby and they will shut it down. Because if the IRS is gonna keep, breaking even where you're just not a tax paying citizen or you're barely contributing, they will shut down your business and tell you that this is a hobby at this point because you're not showing any profit. So if you
Right.
are sitting there, 10 years in a row filing a loss on your taxes, you're probably on the IRS radar. You're the
Yeah.
person that Uncle Sam wants to go after because you're not contributing.
Right. And because in those situations, not saying that everybody does it, there are a lot of people who are notorious for not claiming all of the money that they're getting. So if a client paid them in cash and they just tucked it in their pocket, those are the kinds of things, like, if you don't want to be on the IRS's radar, don't be a subcontractor. Because when you're a subcontractor, the IRS is going to look at you a lot closer. And honestly, the last few years, they've been cracking down more and more on small businesses who have subcontractors because they want to prove that they are actually subcontractors and not employees, for the employees' benefit, because they are seeing that too many people are being exploited by being listed as subcontractors when they shouldn't have been.
So that I heard was after COVID, when COVID came and the world shut down, there were so many people going after unemployment. Like we're talking thousands and thousands of people went after unemployment and were getting this money from the government. But guess what? They never put in their employers never put into the unemployment tax.
Right.
So at that point, it's like the government was paying out money that they didn't have because they never received the unemployment tax from the employer that was misclassifying them as a subcontractor. So as a subcontractor, you do not qualify for unemployment, but during COVID, they made an exception. And that, think of all the money, we're probably talking millions of dollars that
Oh,
were
yeah.
given to these people that were classified as subcontractors because they weren't legally employees.
Right.
So there's definitely, like you said, the ripple effect, the domino effect of how it all works against you. And you have to, when you're an employer that is operating this way, you almost always have to look over your shoulder because you're doing something wrong.
Right.
And why do that? What is the gain? To save $10 or to win a bid because you were $10 cheaper?
Well, let's talk about that. Why do some businesses choose subcontractors and what those hidden risks are? We've kind of touched on some of them, but why do businesses go this route?
Cheaper, no payroll tax, insurance, and or benefits. It's less paperwork, and it can seem more flexible.
Yeah, but the risks don't outweigh the benefit. At the end of the day, an IRS audit, if you get an IRS audit for subcontractors, they're going to come after all of those back taxes. So how long have you had subcontractors? If they prove that they are an employee, they're going to go back and look at however many years you have been doing subcontractors, and they're going to want all of their money for that, plus penalties. Like, you're not just going to get out for what you would have owed in taxes. Labor lawsuits for wage violations. If you can't prove, like, if at the end of the day the person that you have hired to be a contractor comes back and is like, they haven't even been paying me minimum wage, how do you go through that labor lawsuit? And then a big one for me is no control over quality, behavior, or loyalty. I don't want somebody who's going to just come in, get the job done, and leave. I want somebody who, like in our situation, my company is just peachy clean, so we always make the joke that they bleed peach. We want people who bleed peach. We want people who are going to come in here and be a beautiful representation of our company, treat our clients amazing, do an amazing job, and are going to be loyal to us because of the way that we are treating them as employees.
Yeah, and you can't legally train a 1099, which is a huge problem for brand consistency, right? I can't sit there and send a stranger, a subcontractor, into a house and know that they are going to clean. I can't sit there and tell my client, hey, we are the best, most detailed company in the world, and then send somebody into your house and have control over that. I technically, by law, do not have control over that.
Right. Right.
The issue of misclassifying employees as 1099 subcontractors raises significant ethical concerns, primarily because it often leads to like the erosion of workers' rights and creates an unfair imbalance between employers and workers. Some of the key ethical problems are loss of worker protection. Employees are entitled to various legal protections, including minimum wage, overtime, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance. Independent contractors, however, are not afforded those safeguards. Misclassification deprives workers of these fundamental rights and leaves them vulnerable to exploitation and financial hardship.
Well, and that's what we were talking about earlier about being exploited. But the other thing that like we haven't even touched on yet is as an independent contractor, we've said that they are their own business. They have to carry their own insurance. And how many of the businesses that are hiring subcontractors are actually making sure that their subcontractors have insurance and that it is up to date and that it's enough to cover whatever may happen in that house?
I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of a client that would hire somebody like that. If I'm going to hire a company that's severely cheap, I'm going to assume they have subcontractors. Does that client ask, can I see all your subcontractors' insurance? Like, how does the client protect themselves in that situation, right? And I think we're actually going to dive into that a little bit further. Some of the risk of being a client that hires these companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when we are talking to our clients, we spend a lot of time trying to educate between the different of employees and what that means. Like when they're calling around, they may not like our price. We're not the cheapest, and quite frankly, I don't want to be the cheapest. I want to be the best in our industry. I want to raise that standard for everybody else. I want to up level this industry because in my opinion, it is a true actual skilled trade. It's not just hired help. So when they are like, "Oh my gosh, that's a lot of money to spend," we understand you want to call around. In fact, we encourage it. Like, I want you to call around and see what the options are, but we want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So we give them a list of questions of, hey, when you're calling, make sure that they are employees and not subcontractors. Make sure that they have their own insurance. If somebody gets hurt in your house, what does that mean? If somebody breaks something in your house, what does that mean? If you're not happy with the clean, what does that mean? So we try to give them questions that will kind of help them get to the bottom of whether or not they are true employees or if they are subcontractors.
But everyone else does it. That's what you always hear when you speak to other industry professionals that justify why they have 1099 contractors.
Yeah, a
A
lot of
lot of small, yeah.
nope. I was going to say a lot of small business owners think, but that company down the road did it and they got away with it. They're just fine.
But if we're going to bust the myth, just because someone hasn't been caught doesn't mean that it's legal. The IRS doesn't care if it's normal in your area or industry. One disgruntled worker or unemployment claim can trigger a full audit for your company.
Can I wait? So I just can't go to the IRS and go, no, 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 no. It's fine. They do it right down there. It's totally fine. Like they get away with it. Why can't I?
The IRS is going to say, all right, they're next on my audit list.
Yeah, exactly. So that last one that you just talked about, one disgruntled worker or an unemployment claim can trigger a full audit. So again, we don't know what we don't know until we realize we don't know it, right? So the coaching program that we're in, there are so many things that I learned that I didn't even know I needed to know. Because like I said, I had my business model based on the woman who hired me originally, right? So when I joined this coaching program, I switched everything over to W-2 employees. Everything are legit. It's been several years now. But years ago, I had contractors. So I don't know, I think it was last year, somebody that worked for me way back then filed unemployment. Well, when you file for unemployment, you have to list all of your previous employers. And she listed me as a previous employer. From 5, 6 years ago, I had to go through an audit last year because of those decisions I made 5, 6 years ago. So it can happen. Like we're not just telling you this to scare you and go, oh, it may or may not happen. It can happen. Like why would just had to go through this audit last year. Fortunately, it worked out for my benefit because of how we did things, but it all got triggered by an unemployment claim.
Knowing what I know now about having employees, and thinking back, I don't think that it would be possible to truly grow and scale at the level that we do as true employers now. I feel like having 1099 subcontractors, you're asking to be stuck on the hamster wheel because it's employee attrition is probably ridiculous, right?
Right.
Your client attrition is probably ridiculous. If your cleaners aren't leaving and stealing your clients, then they're probably unhappy with the inconsistency with the cleaning. There's so many things that can go wrong that could be solved by just creating a brand, having systems, trainings, all the things that come with the perk of being a legitimate employer, a W-2 employer. So there's this hamster wheel, and it just seems easier, right? It seems easier, like you said, less paperwork, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But is it really? At what
Right.
cost?
Right.
At what cost? At the fact that it's probably a lot harder for you to grow, and you're charging pennies to just get the job. But I bet if you really broke it down with the bookkeeper, you're probably in the red.
Well, okay, perfect example. When I first started the coaching program, and I know we harp on that a lot, but it's been life changing for both of our businesses. When we sat, one of the selling points of the coaching program is when we sat down and she was like, "Okay, let's talk about how much you work a week. Are you still out in the field?" Yes, I'm in the field 2-3 days a week, whatever it is, 3-4 days, I don't remember. And she said, "Okay, how much are you working full days?" Figured out the hours. "How much do you take home every week?" And at the time, I had subcontractors and I was out in the field, and I said, "I don't know. If I need gas money, I take gas money. If we need grocery money, I take it." Like, I wasn't doing it at the time to get rich. She's like, "Yeah, but if you have to pick a number, what does that number look like?" And so I wish I could remember the number so bad now, and I cannot remember the number I told her, but I told her, and she goes, "Let's just do the math on that number. Like, just the number of hours that you were cleaning versus what you're paying yourself. You're not even paying yourself minimum wage. Like, that's not taking into the account of everything else. So if we're not paying attention to it, the math doesn't lie. So I can be thinking I'm paying these subcontractors really great because they're getting so much of what I've charged the client. But if I'm not pricing right and I'm not looking at the whole picture, it doesn't matter. So you're not going to create loyalty to your brand and people who want to stay because they're making $30 for a job. Back then I was like, "Oh, $15 an hour. I'll pay them $15 an hour." That's good money back then. In 2 hours of busting their butts, they made $30. That's a travesty. Like, now looking back, I cringe thinking that I ever ran my business that way.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate. On that same call that I had, I remember her breaking it down for me, and we determined that I was working for like less than $10 an hour. Right. And I went into that so confident. And she was like, "How much are you making?" I was like, "I was making like $2,000 a week." Right. And she was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Okay." And she was like, "Well, how much do you pay your subcontractor?" And I told her. And then like we broke it down. She's like, "Well, how many hours do you work?" And I was like, "Well, I do work Saturday and some Sundays." We determined that I worked probably at least 60 hours a week when you factor in going to go get the supplies, everything. Afterwards, it was like $8 an hour, which is which is entrepreneurial poverty.
Yes. Yeah.
I was killing myself, thought I was building something special, but then I'm not understanding why I have a disconnect notice for all my bills,
Right. Right. I'm
right?
working so hard. This doesn't make sense.
So to save all this paperwork and do things the easy way that Sally down the road's doing and is working for her, I actually was working for less than minimum wage and barely scraping by.
Right.
So
It's crazy. It's like having a subcontractor who actually should be an employee. It's like dating somebody who says, "Oh, we're just casual," but you're sleeping in the same bed. They're driving your car. They're meeting your parents, like all of that stuff. No, you guys are dating. You're not casual. You're dating. This person is not your subcontractor. This person is your employee. You just don't want to make it official. Put a ring on it.
that's a really good reference. I love that. That was good. I'm stealing that.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
And from a client perspective, as someone
Mm-hmm.
that I've seen both sides of this, right? Or actually,
Right.
all three sides. I've seen it as a 1099 employee of another company. I've seen it as a company starting up and trying to hire subcontractors. And now I see it as a W 2 employer. How our expenses look a little bit different, but our services that we offer and the guarantees that we have are justified in our pricing, right?
Right.
But a common theme that we hear on some of these calls that we have with our clients is, "I got a quote for cheaper." Okay, I'm sure you did, but let's talk about those hidden risk.
Right. Yeah, they don't think about that. They don't think about that. I mean, you've got all of the liability issues. So, as I mentioned earlier, I can bring on a subcontractor, but I have to do due diligence to make sure they have insurance as the business owner. But what if I don't do that? What if I don't even know they're supposed to have insurance? And then I send them into your home. You've got that huge liability of, what if they're injured? What if they damage the property? You could be held liable. We had somebody call the office the other day. Her and her sister both had different cleaners, but both solo cleaners. One cleaned for her, one cleaned for her sister, and they both said they were licensed, insured, and everything. Well, the one that was cleaning for her sister slipped and fell in the house and hurt herself and is now suing her sister's homeowner's insurance because she wasn't licensed and insured. So this person called us because she said, I don't care what it takes. I want a company that I know is licensed and insured. So if this happens, they don't come after my homeowner's insurance. That's terrifying.
Yeah, if the cleaning company lacks proper insurance, the client's insurance might have to cover the damages. Just like if a worker steals from a client or commits a crime on the client's property, the client may be held partially responsible due to the lack of proper background checks that a legitimate employee would usually undergo with a legitimate company. So there's a lot of hidden risk.
Right. Yeah. And again, the lack of quality control. So you want us to send somebody in cheaper and we hire the subcontractor to come in. I can't train them. I don't know how they're going to clean it. I'm just going to trust that they're going to do a good job. They can't, who knows if they're going to maintain my high standards.
I can't even tell them what time to be there. So your time preferences mean nothing to me. If you want us there at 8 a.m., I can't hire a subcontractor and tell them to be there at
Right.
8 a.m. They can come when they want. They are their own boss
Correct.
if I'm doing it correctly.
Correct. Yeah, right. Which also means it could be super inconsistent with how when they show up. If you sign up for a biweekly service and you're reliant on a subcontractor, they might show up, they might not show up. How many times have we heard the horror stories of like those $9 cleaning companies where you get set on this program? That's all they send are subcontractors, and you're hoping somebody picks it up. But if they don't pick it up, then nobody shows up to clean that day. So,
It's the DoorDash of cleaning is
right,
all that is. That anybody can get on, put in their little information, and literally see your home address, how many pets you have. Like there's no vetting
right.
whatsoever. And they literally have all your information and they can access that, click accept on the job, show up, and they can show up without supplies and say, what do you want me to do?
Right.
Right? You can't you that's its own podcast, right?
Right.
That's its own episode for sure.
And
But
you
there's
don't tend to
lessons.
get, well, I was going to say, you also don't tend to get loyalty because most people who are subcontractors, and we've seen this over and over again in the cleaning, like Facebook groups we're in and stuff like that, where people who are the subcontractor come in and say, hey, my boss is only paying me this. I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. What do I do? If they already feel like they're being taken advantage of because you're not paying them enough as a subcontractor, you're not going to create loyalty. In fact, what you're probably going to do is build their book of clients because they're going to clean that client for a little while, and then they're just going to tell the client, hey, I'll do it for you for this on the side, and we can cut out the middleman, and then you can get a cheaper price and not have to pay, even involve the other person. So be careful because hiring those subcontractors, you could just be building their book of clients for them to walk away with, and you have no recourse.
Have you ever noticed it when you talk to like 1099 subcontractors, or we'll call them 1099 employees because they're treated like employees, but they're not. Have you ever noticed that they're almost always like that disgruntled employee? They
Always.
always are miserable and hate their job, and it's because they're getting ripped off,
Mm-hmm.
or they know they're being mistreated usually, and they're usually not making a lot of money, like
Yeah.
not even a livable wage, because what it's like self-employment, 30%'s got to go away for taxes or what have you. So, or however much. So
Yeah.
it depends on your deductions. So with that said, if you don't know that and then you're getting hit at the end of the year, like there's just so much that can go wrong. And I feel bad for the people that are exploited as a 1099.
Right. So just for an example, if you're paying them $20 an hour as a subcontractor, 1099, even with just the self-employment tax, which we're saying is about 28%, I think that's what it was last I looked, that's $5.60 off the top. So you're not paying them $20 an hour. They're now making about $15 an hour, right? Actually, 14.40 an hour. They still have to supply their own supplies. So out of that 14.40, now they are having to supply their own vacuum, their own cleaning products, all of that stuff. You keep subtracting. At the end of the day, they're probably bringing home about $8 an hour, $7 an hour. Do you want somebody cleaning your house for $7 an hour around all of your most prized possessions, around all of your most private of things?
And the reputational damage that could happen to a company, because if a client becomes aware that their cleaning company is misclassifying workers, it could damage that client's reputation as well, because consumers are increasingly concerned about ethical labor practices and they may choose to do business with companies that treat their workers fairly.
Mm-hmm.
I know it is very common that 1099 workers are usually on government assistance, right? Because they're not really proving that they have an income. And so that government assistance, it's, we go back to the Uncle Sam of the conversation. The government assistance is paying this money to people that they think aren't making money, but they are making money. So it's taking money from the people that genuinely do need it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Then you have tax liabilities. There are some cases that the client can be held liable for the tax liabilities if it's determined they had a large amount of control over the worker. And what do we mean by that? There is this thing called like the nanny tax, I think is like the unofficial name for it. But if you have a household worker coming in that you are paying more than $2,600 a year and they are on a set schedule that they come every 2 weeks and everything like that, as the homeowner, you could be considered their employer and you would be responsible for their employment taxes.
There's a lot of security risk, right? There's not background checks, there's less control over the workers, there's an increased risk of theft and other security breaches. I can't sit there and take your alarm code for your house and then give it to this person that I've never background checked. I'm not liable if I was the one that was, assigning these jobs to these 1099 subcontractors. Just think of everything that could go wrong.
Or that you're handing a key to, even worse. You can change a
God, I hate
security
keys.
code. No, I do too. We don't take keys anymore. But imagine you hand your house key to who you think is a professional house cleaning company and they hand it to some subcontractor that may or may not show up, and then they have your house key. They quit with no notice, they have your house key. You can change an alarm code very quickly.
Their crazy boyfriend just got out of prison and stole their keys. Like you just never
Yeah.
know.
Yep. So in short, while the client might not directly employ the workers, they're still exposed to a ton of risks due to the cleaning company's unethical labor practices. So why, and I think we've kind of discussed the whole time, why Nicole and I choose to employ W-2 employees. And it's all about consistency, control, culture, long-term stability. Like we want to create, I want to create a place that people love to work and that they see career advancement in. We don't want this to be a transitional job for them. We want this to be something they can see themselves at long term. That comes with being a W-2 employee, not a subcontractor. So that's why we really focus on hiring W-2 employees. And I know Nicole's got her reasons too. Talk to us about why you chose to go that route
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. So I was really sick of being on the hamster wheel, right? Because there's extremely high turnover in the 1099 world, and I couldn't sit here and preach over and over that we're the most detailed company or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I wasn't confident in that. So I'll be honest, the switch was so easy that I was like, what in the world?
Why didn't I do
It
this
was
sooner?
so easy. It was filling out a piece of paper, mailing it in, and then just signing up for, I use Gusto. Love Gusto.
Same. Yeah.
Top tier. I will sponsor me Gusto.
Right. We are not sponsored by Gusto, but we would happily be sponsored by Gusto.
Gusto, your logo could go here.
Yes.
But I mean, come on, the little piggy bank dancing across the screen,
Yep.
adorable, cute, genius, love it. Not sponsored again, but totally would be.
Right.
But it's so easy. I literally put in my little employer number. They do everything. They pay my stuff. They do everything every year. Just have to put in my little tax number and they do the rest. Easy
They
peasy.
file all the nuns, they
The
file all the
direct
W-2s,
deposits.
they mail everything, direct deposits. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, see, you called it 941. Don't even know what that is because Gusto does it for me. Okay.
Only
I'm sure if
because
I saw it.
before Gusto, I had to do all of that stuff before I switched to Gusto.
And in January this year, I opted to not print and mail 30 something W-2s. Instead, I just clicked one little button. And guess what? Gusto mailed all my W-2s for me. Thankful for Gusto for making me compliant and making my job so much easier. It doesn't even hurt us financially because guess what? We charge our worth,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So when I was on the 1099 scale, I maybe grew like maybe 10K a year, right? In what, 3 years, right? How long have we been in the
Yeah.
program? Like 3
A
years?
little over 3.
In 3 years, I've gone from 150K to an over $1 million company. And guess what switched? I have employees.
Right.
I have been able to build my brand. I have been able to retain employees. But I've been able to focus on culture. I've been able to make an employee handbook, which couldn't exist before, right?
Right. Right.
All these things I can actually create this business. I can create core values. Like I get to have this business that I looked up to for so long, and it's so easy.
I think people just get scared because it is the IRS and it's like, oh, I only have to do a 1099 at the end of the year. I don't need to do all of this other stuff throughout the year. But if you get something like Gusto, or if you have a good accountant or something like that, really, guys, it's not that hard. At the end of the day, it protects you and it protects your employees.
I am more scared of the IRS over my shoulder if I'm doing it the wrong way,
Oh my gosh, 100%.
right?
Yeah.
Using Gusto or any other program, but Gusto is going to sponsor me one day. I'm going to cross my fingers on that one. But using Gusto and knowing that, and you still always have to check because sometimes there might be an issue, especially if you're a new company coming in. You got to make sure the tax number and things like that are right. So always be double checking and inspecting what you expect, right?
Hmm.
But they make it so easy that I don't have to worry about not being compliant. And
But you know
Gusto
what?
even has like all these like state specific websites that they send you to can make sure that you're compliant. I love that. I respect that. Thank you, Gusto.
Yeah, no, but not only that, the other side is they make it really easy for our employees too. Do you know how many times I've had an employee sit down with me with the W-4 and go, I don't know how to fill this out. I'm like, I don't know, just do it in Gusto. Like, because Gusto explains every step along the way and what you need to be listing as your deductions and stuff like that. They make it so easy for our employees too that we're not having to answer the same questions we were before.
Yeah, pay stubs, everything's broken down right there, saved in your folder. You can access it even when you're not with me anymore. Go ahead. All your information is right there. But there are other programs other than Gusto. Gusto's just the best. Sponsor me. But
We won't
there
even
are so
mention the
many
other
programs.
ones, Gusto.
No, we're not going to talk about the competitors. There are other ones. I'm not going to say who, but you have to manually input all the tax information, and it's usually gets messed up. And we hear a lot of companies complain when they find out they're thousands of dollars deep in debt
Right.
because that program did it wrong. And it's like, can't relate because I use Gusto, but
Right.
they're going to sponsor me one day. I mean, I just can't get over every
That'll
time I
be
see
our
the little
dream.
piggy. The little piggy with the, oh my goodness, the piggy bank. It's so cute.
But also, the other cool part of that, and then we'll get off of this because I know we're not talking about payroll, is within a program, specifically Gusto, because that's what we're talking about, but there are other ones do it as well. They do direct deposit. Our employees get to choose which accounts they want it to go in. So our employees get to choose, I want $10 in savings. I want $30 in this account. I want whatever. Or it can all go into the same account. Before it was just, I don't know, here's a paper check or here's some cash, whatever, do with it what you will. Now they can actually be set up for more success and to be able to save and do things that they want to do just by going through a program like that too.
Yeah, you can
That
manage
off
time
topic.
off request. You can manage time off request. Yeah, sorry. There's a lot that it
I
can do.
know.
That's maybe an episode we need to do. But all right, let's go ahead. Let's talk about the return of
I
investment
digress.
of doing it right, right?
Yeah,
You have
right.
higher retention, you have more control over quality, you have a better brand alignment with trained team members. You can create a training system. You can have uniforms, a business that is scalable, sellable, and audit proof.
Right. Say it plainly, you're not building a hustle, you're building an asset. This is your legacy. Don't cut corners with things that you don't cut corners on things that we care about. We pay more up front, but we sleep at night, right?
So, how to get it right,
Actually,
even if you've
one
been
quick
doing it wrong.
second before we move on to that. I have a story that I want to tell you about with a walkthrough that I did yesterday. So we don't do a lot of walkthroughs anymore. Most of our residential is done over the phone, but we do commercial walkthroughs because every commercial space is different, and we do take on a few commercials here and there. I went and walked an apartment complex yesterday. Beautiful, like the most gorgeous apartment complex I've ever seen. They literally have a flight simulator inside this apartment complex. It's like top tier, top notch. They have a whole computer room that's got like gaming systems and all that. Anyway, at the end of it, while I was kind of getting my stuff together and she finished explaining it, I said, well, I'm not sure how much they told you about us over the phone, but let me tell you a little bit about the company so that you have a better idea of who we are. And I said, we've been in a business almost 11 years now. May will be 11 years. I said, for your safety, all of our employees are W-2 employees, not subcontractors. So they're covered under our insurance, our license, our bonding, all of that. And she looked at me and she got this big smile on her face and she goes, you're already speaking my language. I said, well, on top of that, I said they go through continuing education every year where they learn what products are safe on what surfaces. We have certified like continuing education that they go through. We have deep clean specialists. And she's just getting a bigger and bigger smile. She goes, Can I show you the 342 student turns that we have to do in July? Because I'd really rather have somebody like your company than the companies that I've been hiring, which bring in subcontractors and do this. And she pointed to her shelf in her office, and it's a white shelf and it is coated in dust. She said, they're here weekly. I was like, that's amazing.
I have yet to find a property manager like that that's willing to pay the cost. And I have even I've given offered discounts, and it's really sad because these big companies that have the means to do it, they charge an arm and a leg when people move out. They are okay, like you said, exploiting somebody down the road to save a buck. At that point, y'all have the means to hire, train, and have them clean to your standard.
Right.
But they don't. There's
Nope.
something broken there.
So, how do you get it right, even if you've been doing it wrong? Listen, there's no shame to you because we've both been there, but we're here to help you pivot. You need to start talking to a payroll provider or an HR consultant. Attention, gusto. Invest in workers' comp, unemployment insurance, and proper onboarding. You're going to create policies that support your team, not scare you legally. And don't don't turn us off yet.
And if you do use subs, just make sure they have their own business license, provide their own tools, invoice you, and they work for multiple companies. They aren't trained or scheduled by you, and you better cross your fingers it's somebody you can trust.
Correct. Because really, all it takes is one of them getting mad and turning you into the IRS, and then that opens up a whole storm. If what we just said and all of those check marks that I just listed off to you scare you, please don't let it scare you. Like that sounds super scary, but at the end of the day, it's not compared to what you will have to deal with the IRS if you have to go that way. And now with ChatGPT and with all of the coaching programs that are out there and all of the things, there is so much knowledge out there. You just have to seek it out a little bit. We also don't want to scare you and think that having W-2 employees means that you're corporate and cold. Nicole and I are not corporate and cold. Like our companies are very warm and personable and beautiful, and I love them. Reframe the idea that hiring employees equals red tape and rigid systems.
You can still have fun. You can have a connected team culture.
Yep, having structure actually allows you to treat people better and more consistently. When I had subcontractors before, I couldn't do team appreciation events. I couldn't do like little crazy national holiday events like Chicken Tender Day where I get them a gift certificate to Huey Magoo so they can go get chicken tenders. I couldn't do that stuff before because there was no profit at the end of the day. There was nothing at the end of the day for me to be able to show them even more how I appreciate them. Now we pay them ridiculously well, and we can still do that because we want to keep them as employees.
Yeah, we've booked 3 team outings. We had a outing for our trainers. We are about to do a team laser tag for the whole team. And
We're going to do a
then we're
bowling.
taking, oh, fun.
Yeah.
Then we are going to go take our deep clean specialist out for an event. So we're going to do an escape room for that one. With the trainers, we went and painted pottery. It was so
Oh, that's
fun.
cool.
Highly
Yeah.
recommend. So we're doing all these fun things, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't even get 10 employees when you know what I mean?
Right.
Or 10 subcontractors,
I couldn't get a
right? So,
trainee or a trainer. I mean, like, who's going to train me? Like, nobody had the loyalty or the wherewithal to be a trainer back then because I wasn't training them properly.
I didn't have the patience.
No,
I was broke and impatient and probably
just do it.
hungry. Yeah.
Right.
But you're not doing it right. But it's not even about micromanaging. It's about building something legit because I feel like everyone deserves that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I gave my confession earlier about how I got audited and had to deal with that. So not fun. Again, thankfully, I was able to come out ahead. But regardless, like it's not fun and it's scary. And there is so much freedom in knowing you're doing something right than having that mental load of what if I get caught? What if I get caught? What if I get caught?
But I'm trying to really put myself in the mindset of the people that are doing it that way. What are they gaining? Right? I can't think of what are you gaining by underbidding legitimate companies just to get a gig, but you're looking over your shoulder and you're literally one phone call or one letter away from your whole world getting rocked. I'm going to assume because these companies tend to be very cheap.
Right.
I'm going to assume that you can't really make ends meet. And my heart breaks for you because there is a better way, and Gusto makes it so easy for you. But I don't have an IRS story. I will say that, I'm very, very blessed and grateful that I have been able to quickly address and identify what needed to be corrected. But that also comes from the wise seek counsel, right? I always am hungry to learn more and ask questions.
Can I?
And now I have the pleasure of knowing it all.
Yeah,
So
you absolutely know everything. I don't know why we all just don't come to Nicole. Like,
I'm
if
just
you have
kidding.
a problem, go to Nicole. She has the answers. And even if she doesn't have the answers, she has the answers. So just, that's how it
If
works.
I
But
don't have the answers, the question was wrong.
that is the snippet for this episode. If I don't have the answers, the question was wrong. I love it. I want to touch on something that you just said though, when you were like saying, why are people doing this? And you're guessing that they are probably struggling and having a hard time making ends meet. How much worse will that be if you get an IRS audit and you now owe $20,000 in back taxes?
Yeah, how much worse is it going to be when you have an IRS audit because you sent somebody in someone's home that got injured and then they sued that client and then that client blasted you all over Facebook because that client's getting sued by the worker that you sent,
Yep.
you name it. And now you don't have any work because you were just blasted all over social media. And also, as a client, if you're hiring a company that employs 1099 subcontractors, that client, it could be responsible for the taxes. Touched on that, the nanny law. I don't think that clients understand that if
No, they
that
don't.
cleaner goes and says, hey, I clean that house every Friday, if they go to the IRS or the state board and they try to file for unemployment, that client might be responsible for paying it.
Right?
So there's so many risks as a client. All in all, it is so much easier to just do it the right way, and Gusto makes it super easy.
They make it the easiest. And then you don't have to worry. Like, we're saying all of this not to scare you, not to run you off, not to make you guys go, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to continue to do it my way. We are really just saying this because we don't want you to get into a situation that you can't get out of. We don't want you to get yourself in a financial situation that you owe all of these back taxes. We don't want you to get sued and have all of these other things happening with clients and all of that stuff. We want you to protect your business because, like we said earlier, this is your legacy. You are putting your hard work, your blood, sweat, tears, time, hours, all of the things. This is an easy way to begin to protect it.
Hiring 1099s the wrong way feels easier, but it's just putting your business on a time bomb. It's hard to do things the right way, but it builds something that lasts when you do.
Yep, absolutely. And as we come to a close on this episode, if you've stayed this long, we love you dearly. If you've ever paid someone under the table or handed out a 1099 without blinking, this episode was your warning. Now that you know better, do better. The difference between a hustle and a real business is employees, structure, compliance. If you're ready to do it right and build something that lasts, this is where you start. So be sure to hit the subscribe button on all the platforms. Listen to us everywhere. Share it with all your friends. Leave us a review. Share it with your favorite rule bender before the IRS does it for them. We look forward to seeing you guys next time, and we're going to talk about how to pivot when employees go wrong.
I really want to encourage people to comment. Let us know. Have you ever been audited with IRS and what did you learn in that process?
Absolutely. That would be amazing. All right,
All right.
guys.
Well, y'all have a
We will
good
see
day.
you.